the investment in relationships is very, very high. People do business with people much more so than brands or structures or commercial models or anything. Trust and having a network, having other people that vouch for you, I think the human element is just turned up to 10. And that can be difficult for more quick win, goal-oriented cultures, I suppose. But it's really about establishing that relationship, and things come later with good time.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo Bango Bongo, Kyle Wiltshire, CEO and founder of TESTA. How's it going, Kyle?
Very good. Very cool to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. We are on like a kind of Monday blues, if you will, after last week conference scheduled together. So I like that we are keeping strong here today and doing this podcast. But how did everything go with TESTA and everything last week at the Next Valletta show?
It was fantastic. Our first time at Next. First time exhibiting, but I've only been to Malta once before, so just really cool to be in such an important place for iGaming and see so many friends I already know and get to know some other people better. But yeah, it was an action-packed week. I think everybody's just talking about how low-key their weekend was. But yeah, it's Monday and we're back at her.
And Kyle, we have such a great introduction story together. And it's one of those things that just goes to show how important it is to always be attentive at shows, because we met at G2E Vegas the first time, I think 2022 it was, and I was sitting eating a slice of pizza during the lunch at G2E, and you sat down next to me. You were like, is there a seat open here? And then we started chatting about what we do, and it was really interesting to hear you were just starting TESTA, and we become friends, and here we are in the studio. So it just goes to show how good it is to always keep your eyes and ears open at these things.
Absolutely. I mean, to be fair, I spotted you a bit away, and I was like, I think that's Pierre. I think that's the guy that does the next podcast. Like, seems to be by himself. Why don't we chat him up a little? And yeah, exactly. And I appreciate you being open to the idea. That's the best part of these shows, right? I mean, you finally put faces to names, and you actually build relationships, and it all comes together sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't, but in this case, it was great. So thank you.
Awesome, Kyle. And I am really excited for the episode today, because we are covering a topic that is becoming more and more interesting and relevant, but we have not covered it in the past, and I don't think I've ever seen any other industry podcast that is covering the topic today, which is how to establish your iGaming business or your reputation as an industry professional in Southeast Asia, right? This is a territory that is becoming more and more relevant for our industries. There's some territories that within the region that are potentially regulating for the first time, and just generally, it's such a massive potential, but at the same time, culturally very different from the European and the North American segment. And so, to kick off this conversation, Kyle, can you talk a little bit about your background in Southeast Asia, and how did you kind of enter this part of the world, and what's your background in general?
So it's a bit of a long story, but I'll do my best to condense it. I started working for an operator that eventually, originally moved me to Montreal. We were in Kanawaki, and then they got a first Gagain license at the time, and they needed a team to help kind of establish some tech infrastructure and ops there. So that took me to Manila for the first time in 2010. Spent a couple months recruiting people and everything there before I finally went over. So that was kind of my first time I ever jumped on a plane and went over to Asia, and I was just, 24 or 25 at the time, and it was just the opportunity that kind of came up. So I jumped over there, and of course it was supposed to be, this project that was 1 month, and 1 month turned into 3, and 3 turned into a year, and all of a sudden it was indefinite. But so I had moved over there by 2010, worked with that operator both under their first Gagain licensed kind of Asia division, but also they were building out a lot of support for other markets in the Philippines. So there was a call center and all sorts of different tech teams. So I was kind of responsible for bringing on different tech professionals to handle basically a lot of the infrastructure and kind of first line support and what we call DevOps now, but at the time we had different terms for. So that's what originally brought me out there. I left that company in 2013, I think. I was actually doing an MBA in the Philippines, in Manila, at the same time as a real estate startup with a partner of mine that also worked at the same company. So for 3 or 4 years, we ran that. I learned how to run a startup at the same time as doing an MBA, so it was probably the craziest 2 years of my life, because it was just learning the theoretical at night school and then doing it during the day and it all coming together. So the amount of stuff I learned in those years was fantastic. Around 2016, 2017, as I was kind of planning an exit from Manila, I wanted to move back to Canada. Had an opportunity come my way where a large iGaming provider who was growing in the region had started doing business, but they couldn't make their technology work. So we started working with them to putting all the pieces together, making their infrastructure work in the region. Started a company called Gigantech, which does consulting for iGaming businesses, and we've got other clients in cybersecurity, in some manufacturing and SaaS and all sorts of different stuff in the region. So really niche stuff that deals with device optimization, performance, uptime, all these type of really specific technical hurdles you get to in this region. I moved back to Canada in 2017. But around that time, that business was growing. And in the last few years, we've spun a company out of that technical consultancy called TESTA. TESTA does crowd testing. So we always had testers and people in these markets that could validate the technical work we were doing. And eventually, we started to see when these projects would wrap up, clients would say, hey, you had some people in Thailand or India or wherever. Do you have people here? Do you have people there? And we learned more about crowd testing as a whole, and we split it off. So that's a mouthful, but that's the whole story. So TESTA is now headquartered in Taipei, Taiwan. There are some people in Philippines and all sorts of other locations in Asia. I'm in Canada, but I'm over there quite often. Married a Filipino, brought her back to Canada, so I'm in Philippines quite a few times a year for business and personal reasons, and yeah, that's my link to Asia and that world out there in general.
That's awesome, Kylan. You're obviously one of the kind of early professionals that have seen a lot of change and seen the industry develop and grow in that region. So to that end, how, from your perspective, has the iGaming industry, the gambling industry, developed over time in Asia? Is it different now than it was, say, 15 years ago?
Massively. I mean, when I moved over there, it was the wave of China. Everything was China, not just iGaming, but in general. Okay. So this was the years where Facebook was trying to get into that market and Google was still trying to get into the market. And it was kind of, China was this and all the other markets were these tiny little things. Right. So that was very much the focus for iGaming, and that's where a lot of it was derived. That remained the case for maybe almost a decade now, 7-8 years. But more so in the last few years, Southeast Asia has grown a lot. China is a very black, very difficult market to do anything in. It's shrunk a lot. The enforcement's been quite high. So almost everybody's kind of turned tail and run. I mean, it was a public thing. 365 recently just turned that down, that market down. So it is less an East Asia focused region now and more so Southeast Asia, India and kind of South Asia, I would say as well, have been kind of the growing giants recently. So it's much more different markets, younger demographics that are growing, whereas East Asia, you tend to see older populations, more mature markets. So.
Yeah, interesting. And so we have a conference coming up now in Sigma in Manila, and a lot of companies, organizations, professionals will be traveling over there from Europe with the hope of doing business in Southeast Asia. Now, as mentioned earlier, massive culture difference, language barriers, just a different world entirely. So I wanted to just kick off this conversation of like, from your perspective, what are the most important culture differences in a business context to be aware of if you want to do business with local professionals in Southeast Asia?
So I would say a lot of things that apply in Europe and other markets in our sector, they apply there, but just like magnify them by 4 or 5 times. So the relationship is absolutely everything. You make friends first and you spend a lot of time together and you get to know each other, and business may follow. And what timeline it follows on and how that business gets done is not something you're going to figure out in the first few interactions. It'll probably come far later. So the investment in relationships is very, very high. And again, in our sector, that's always been the case, but this is something in the region in general. People do business with people much more so than brands or structures or commercial models or anything.
Right. So it's maybe not the most important thing if you have a better product than your competitor. Let's say it's much more important to build trust with people. That's what you're saying, kind of.
Trust and having a network, having other people that vouch for you. If you're walking in absolutely cold and you don't have some sort of partner, some sort of warm introduction, it'll be very hard. Of course, people will be polite and chat with you or whatever, but as far as like actually moving things forward, I think the human element is just turned up to 10. And that can be difficult for more quick win, goal-oriented cultures, I suppose. But it's really about establishing that relationship, and things come later with good time.
Yeah, right. So this kind of traditional ABC selling, always be closing, move on to the next sale after, that is absolutely not the key in this.
No, that will not get you far.
Right. So if you are, let's say, a company that hasn't done business in Southeast Asia and you're heading over to this conference for the first time, it can be a bit daunting, I suppose. I mean, where do you even start? Where do you even begin? Let's say, how would you recommend a new company or a new professional to start off when you fly over there?
Find people that are well connected and are either bring them into your team or are heavily incentivized to introduce you and get you connected. Partnerships and referrals are very, very key. Ideally, you've got someone that's actually full-time focused on what you do, because there are a lot of wheeling, dealing, they'll sign some sort of a referral agreement with you, but if they'll actually be bought in is a totally different story. So it's really about having introductions into those key networks. Of course, it can be done, but to go up kind of cold at expos and build business that way is probably not going to be your best way to start, building those relationships.
Yeah, because that's another thing, right? So let's say that you decide that you head over there, you exhibit, and you're hoping that people are going to come up to your stand on a kind of cold sale basis. Like, that doesn't seem to be the case. Also, because the difference perhaps in that area is that not everyone goes to the conference in the first place. Like, what I hear is that a lot of the business happens outside of the conference.
That's right. To a pretty extreme degree, I'd say. I mean, there's going to be people that are walking the floor and checking things out, but as far as decision makers and owners and senior people, you'd be amazed how many people are in town, but if you actually see them at an expo or a show, it's a very different kind of story. So the benefit is that everyone is there and they are close, and they may be at parties or private events and everything, but if you're hoping that the booth will close all the business, that's not quite how it works. Now, that said, an expo floor is still valuable. You see who's trying to gain share in the market, who's advertising to it. You're still going to meet people, and like I said, maybe you you meet the person that introduces you to the person that
Right.
introduces you to the person, right? So it's certainly worth doing, but I would say that a little bit less so than other markets is being on the trade room floor just going to turn into immediate opportunities.
Brilliant. Any other advice? Let's say you go over to the show as a first time kind of explorer from Europe or North America. Anything else you have to think about?
Quite a bit. I mean,
We have time.
those networks we were talking about. I mean, be ready to share profits with those people. Basically, you need a good incentive system for people to represent you and pass business your way. Again, in the region, you'll find that there are, quite a few, I'd almost call them power brokers, that really their word means a lot and they can open quite a lot of doors. But this isn't something that's ever going to happen just from the kindness of their heart, right? It's very much commercial, and they are aware that their word means a lot. So I think that's important to keep in mind, and adjust your financial models accordingly if you have to.
Yeah. But on that note, so trust is a massive factor, of course, but it's a two-way street as well. So let's say that you do set an agreement with one of these power brokers. You also give away a lot of trust as a business there. You have to really be on point, knowing that you can trust this person back. Let's say, do you in general in Southeast Asia, do you feel that these relationships often do follow through, or is there a lot of let's say nefarious players out there that you should try to avoid, that will try to take advantage of you entering the market? So
Bit of both. So I mean, there's always going to be the ones that don't play fair, and there's plenty of people that are out there, and they're absolutely willing to help, and they can open those doors if they find that your product, your service is strong enough. So no easy answer. Like I said earlier, I think the key is just getting to know those people. Don't go in there and sign any sort of partnership or agreement with a couple meetings, right? If I could generally comment on the failures I've seen, it's that people view this part of the world as, well, we're just going to grow over there. And as long as we show up to a few shows and shake a few hands or whatever, things will follow. It is a long-term commitment where you need people in the region, you need to understand these different regions, and you need to build these relationships, which may take years. So there is no quick wins. This is, they are probably some of the largest and deepest markets in the world, but they are not places where you're just going to go and snap your fingers and make things happen, right? In the consulting business, we saw quite a lot of people that signed up with, initial distributions and came on board to our platform and everything, and the traffic never flowed because they just didn't have people in the region. They were hoping one or two resellers would bring them the business, but the reality is there's 400 or 500 studios out there now. Yeah. So how do you actually stand out and build the trust and be competitive in the region if you're not in there doing business all the time? Yeah,
it's a great point. So going there, it means commitment. You can't just do it half-assed. Let's say it is. If you do it, you have to do it right. Let's say.
And I would say take your timelines and triple them, quadruple them.
Wow.
Just because of all the relationships you need to build and how long that will take. So there are no quick wins. So I think that's the biggest mistake. These markets are absolutely worth going after, but don't assume that you're going to be, cranking up big GGR numbers in 6 months or whatever, right? It's a long-term commitment.
Yeah, and if I understand things correctly, a lot of the operators, and customers, often very shy, right? They don't necessarily want to be at the exhibition or put their names out there and so on and so forth. So that also puts a lot of pressure on these intermediaries to be the person who intermediates the connection between the two companies. So I would imagine that relationship building process then takes a lot longer time, because it just takes a longer time to actually do come through that door and actually do make that handshake at the end of the day. I would imagine.
That's entirely correct. So I mean, none of this is that different from other markets. Like I said, it's just amplified. So if you think that, being in Asia Pacific is going to go along a similar playbook that you had somewhere else, you're going to be frustrated. So just make sure you've got the financial resources and the time resources if this is a place you're going to be targeting.
Yeah, I felt there's a difference perhaps between Europe and North America that I've noticed setting up our businesses in both of those parts of the world is in Europe there isn't kind of like the industry isn't as glued together in a way where there's these like kind of networks of people that bind together, whereas the North Americans are much more relationship focused, let's say. So,
interesting.
So I find that, for example, it's difficult to get your foot through the door in the US, but once you do, you are kind of accepted by everyone at the same time. Let's say that when you have your first successful business case, once you have someone who has bought into you, who is willing to speak well and to recommend you, then it goes very quick through that network, let's say. Whereas in Europe, there isn't really those type of connectors, let's say, in this market. So the companies work more individually, and so it's more like a gradual process, let's say. So to that end, is it similar in, let's say, Southeast Asia, that kind of when you get the foot through the door, when you establish your name as a trustable person and so on, like then it kind of spirals quicker?
I think so. I can think of a number of circumstances where a client of ours got their first big deal, and as long as it's a sizable deal or it's something that's respected, that news goes through the network quite quickly that, X signed with them, so okay, they must have done their homework, and maybe they're all right. Maybe we can talk to them, right? So yeah, that example of kind of the one that breaks the ice, that I've seen that quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then let's say on a personal level, going over there, there's also like a lot of unspoken rules, let's say, how to show respect and so on in meetings, right? So maybe you want to highlight a few of these like good tricks to know as an individual when you start meeting people.
So I was reminded, this is second nature to me, but business card etiquette. I think this originally comes from Japan, but you'll see it almost everywhere in East and Southeast Asia. You hand a business card over with two hands. You accept it with two hands, and you kind of like nod your head to, I guess it's a bit of a bow, just to show that you're receiving it respectfully. Maybe this is not as common with the younger generation. It's going to be a little bit more of a telegram barcode and everything. But you'll meet plenty of people where this is still kind of the common practice. If you're having a sit-down meeting, this is more important. So if somebody hands you a card with two hands, you accept it. And if you're sitting at a table, you should put the cards in front of you with everybody's names. So this is kind of like your index or your key to who you're talking to, right? And at the end of the meeting, then you take the cards, and ideally you put them in a briefcase or something, not your pocket. But again, this is kind of formal Japanese etiquette that you'll see a fair amount. It's a little more loose now, but if you were to just snap a business card into somebody's hand, you're kind of sending a signal that you don't do much business in the region, right?
Right.
If you were to sit down and shuffle them all, same thing. So little bits of etiquette like this are very important. If you're unsure, this is why you have good partners. They can show you the ropes, right?
Yeah, for sure. Are there other etiquettes like this to keep in mind as well, would you say?
They're just kind of downstream from culture. In Asia, I would say that hierarchy is more based in the culture. There's interesting research you can look at this on this. I forgot the name of the researcher, but he's Dutch and he did it with IBM. But it's called power distance. So it's basically just how ingrained hierarchies are in a given culture. A country like Sweden or I think Austria or a lot of the Scandinavian countries are some of the lowest. So the hierarchy is quite flat, and you wouldn't feel, you can talk to the CEO, or you can, in Asia, you'll often see that the ranking is quite known. And it's very common that, you're chit-chatting with 3 or 4 people, and the boss walks into the circle for the conversation, and things will stop, and people will now look. So there's kind of a deference of who's the most important in the room, and little signals to do that. So it's good to know who you're speaking with and who's kind of, I suppose, the most respected in the room. That can be helpful. Something else, again, this is in any culture, but it's just amplified in Asia is you never want somebody to lose face in front of a group of people. That could end a relationship permanently and very quickly.
Like in what regard?
If you were to say something insulting or discredit them in front of, and sometimes in my culture or, American culture, it's a bit easier to kind of rib people and everything. It's part of it. And it's almost like you build some credit by being able to do that, right?
Okay.
In Asian cultures, this can derail things very, very quickly.
That's very interesting.
If you're very close friends and it's quiet, maybe it's a bit easier to do. But if you were to do this publicly, it could be finished very, very fast.
So in a formal setting, it is important to stay formal in that setting, let's say then.
Yeah, and just like I said, knowing that this isn't absolute, but just knowing who the people are in the room and who, the ranks essentially. I hate to kind of say it that way, but that's the way it is. I mean, I have trouble with this sometimes with my own team. I want people to challenge me, and the people that work quite closely with me, they feel totally fine doing that, and I love it, right? Yeah. But there's still that kind of, sometimes you walk into the office and it gets too quiet, and it's like, oh, come on, I'm
the boss is
lay it on me, come on. You have to take them out drinking and, ease things up a little.
Yeah, exactly. So to that end as well, speaking about the importance of hierarchies in Asia in general, what about, for example, if you're a woman trying to do business over there? Is there differences perhaps that you need to be aware of in that regard as well? Would it be more challenging as a woman to create business over there, would you say? How is
Things are getting more progressive, so generally I wouldn't say so. I think what would be difficult is a lot of business is done after hours. It's done at bars, it's KTVs, whatever, right? A lot of karaoke late into the night. So that can be maybe a little more challenging for women. That said, some of the strongest salespeople and account professionals I know in the region are women, so there's no hard and fast rule saying no, but I think it would be a little more challenging than other markets for sure.
But you say so that's something I understand as well, that the relationship starts quite formal, but then in order to really break through, it is out late night, heavy drinking. That's what you are expected to do in order to truly break through in general in the culture.
And we spoke a lot about trust and building that relationship, and that's how it happens. The more nights out, the more time you've spent together, the more, the whole thing with drinking is you become a little vulnerable. Everybody talks too much, right? Yeah. So that's kind of what builds those relationships up. So there is some method to the madness, but there's a lot of madness too. It's just, I think another thing I've kind of seen companies fall flat on is they send out their suit and tie proper professionals, and maybe they will go with the formal meetings and all that, and they're good at that. But if they don't know how to build that relationship in the after hours setting, or having the dinners and just having the kind of more personal interactions, the business just won't happen. Everything flows down from those kind of interactions. Yeah.
So say on the European side or the American side, the kind of start to finish relationships is quite formal generally. Whereas in this market it starts formal, but then when you are put into these more, let's say, like challenging environments, that's when you really get to see who people are, let's say, perhaps, and that's where deeper trust is born through.
Absolutely. And when an actual commercial partnership starts, in many ways, that's actually the beginning of the professional relationship, and you start all over again. So I would say that. Again, I'm generalizing here, but in Canada and the US and Europe, a contract is this ironclad thing. It's the contract. This can be a little looser in Asia. So the contract is where we started, and now things are evolving, and what now, right? So there's a little less kind of litigiousness, or this was in the black and white, right? Like, again, it all comes downstream of the relationship.
Yeah. I heard some stories as well of surrounding price consciousness. I know an M&A broker really well, and he said that when they have Asian buyers or businesses, usually there will be a negotiation that takes place, and the two parties agrees. Let's say the Asian side of the business comes over to sign and to formalize the relationship. and then they want to continue to negotiate when it's actually time for signing, let's say. Is that something you experience as well?
Yes. And it's just go in with your guard up and being ready to have those. They're hard and fast negotiators. I've seen many times where a provider will sign with somebody large, and they'll get promoted in the first week or two. Looks great, then the traffic goes away, and now we want to talk numbers again, right? So there's a lot of these kind of strong techniques, and there's a lot of big incentives to get those numbers down as low as possible. And the people that have done very well have found a way to make it work in their models, that they can have that mix of product quality, commercial incentives, and make it all kind of come together. But it is much more of a price conscious market, and it can be pretty ruthless sometimes. So just go in knowing that, go in being ready to play ball.
Right. So let's say the first negotiation and the first handshake, what we are used to is that's the deal, then we move forward. But in this market, this is just the first part of negotiation, perhaps. And, be prepared on that. At the end of the day, you build that trust. You go out together. You get to know each other. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a price war, even after the contract is signed, perhaps.
Yes, generally. But I've seen different avenues to success. I've seen people that come in with those crazy, the commissions will be super low for a year or two, and then they'll notch it up a little, and they do quite well. But I've also seen companies that come in with quality, and they stick to their guns. And as long as they can prove that I've got a stronger player or a more, VIP player or whatever, they can fight it out as well. So there's no single path to success, but you just need to be ready for those price wars and sharp numbers, for sure.
And just going back to the point on hierarchies. So how important is it, let's say, if you're like a young account manager and you're pretty low in that hierarchy, let's say, how important is it perhaps to involve more senior people into making, serious deals happen? Does the CEO need to be there, let's say, to make a deal happen on a more serious level, or can business be done with more juniors, let's say?
Depends who you're talking to and kind of where they sit. But yes, often you'll have to get more senior people involved if it's gotten to a point where it doesn't seem to move past. There is that, I would say, in the Asia markets, that, again, you'll see this anywhere where bringing somebody in more senior is a signal that, okay, we're taking this seriously. But I would say that's a more effective thing to do in Asia Pacific than in other places, just because, they've flown in this guy or this guy, they're actually focusing on Asia. And like I said, I think a lot of people go over there just thinking it's another market like anything else. So they're also used to it. I mean, I saw a big wave in 2017, 2018, where a bunch of providers they all came in, and it was sloppy, to be honest, right? They all went to a few shows and, thought if they got on one aggregator, it would all be fine, right? But if you're not planting yourself down there and having those conversations regularly, and if you don't have some senior people there that actually have decision-making authority, you're not going to move the needle much.
No, for sure. And are there other trust signals that you can bring with you as well as an organization? I mean, let's say, for example, that you domicile your business in the region, you open an office locally. Are these things going to help you as well? Let's say, outside of just having, let's say, a power broker or a full-timer, are there other things you can do to build that trust too?
Yeah, I think that's kind of table stakes if you're taking the region seriously. Having resellers and smart people is always good, but they've probably got 7 or 8 things that they're working on at any given time. So having dedicated resources is very important. There's all sorts of little community meetups and things that happen kind of privately outside of the events and industries, right? So I think it's very important that you've got people that can be at those places. Yeah. Like anything else, if they're a face you see often, eventually that is going to lead to something. But if you think you're going to go to 2 Asian expos a year and build a company out of that in the region, it's not going to work.
Yeah, fair enough. And we speak about Southeast Asia as a region and we talk culture, but of course, if we think about Europe as a continent, each country has its very particular culture, very distinct from one another. What would you say the differences are in the Southeast Asia region from country to country? Do you experience very different cultures and how to meet and greet people and how to get that trust with?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, it's a geographic region. It's not a cultural region, really. Indonesia is Muslim, and in Bali they're Hindu. Malaysia is Muslim. Singapore, you'll see a lot of Christians, and that's just religion. Philippines is Catholic. I mean, so all these things are quite different. There's an ethno-Chinese kind of minority all the way through Southeast Asia and into China, and their cultures and their kind of background may be different than the other cultures. So then you get into the demographics of how young and old is this country. What's the kind of, I think Malaysia's GDP is one of the highest in the region. Thailand's somewhere in the middle, and then like Indonesia or Myanmar or whatever is quite different, right? So knowing each region, what the market looks like, what the people from the region you'll be dealing with, what their background and context is very, very important, because we say these things conveniently the same way we say Europe, but there's no such thing as Southeast Asia. It's whatever, 9, 10 countries, maybe a bit more. I should know that.
Cool. So let's zoom in on some of the regions that are developing and that things are happening within. I mean, Southeast Asia in general has somewhat a history of being known for being the classical black market, let's say, with very light shy players. But we have, for example, Philippines that does have regulation in place and an actual thriving ecosystem. Thailand rumored to perhaps be regulating soon for iGaming as well. Other territories likewise. Can you talk about a few territories like Philippines, Thailand, and others one by one, and the opportunities that present themselves now that regulation might come into play?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll start with the Philippines because that's been the biggest seismic shift. Originally, they had a small overseas license that was done through the first Cagayan. When I was saying that the operator I worked for, it was done through that. Then the Pogo craziness came in the last few years, and that whole element kind of exploded. They wound that down last year, which, many people in the government were worried they were going to lose all the tax revenue and everything. But they also created a local license just before that called the Pigo license. So it is now the only, online gambling jurisdiction in the region that's regulated. And I'm frankly shocked I don't hear more about it in the European or American media. I mean, it's a regulated territory. There's a few platform companies there that have made an absolute killing because the land-based casinos have all set up online properties, and these platforms are doing all of them. So I'm really surprised that I don't see more of an effort to go after that local market. I mean, it's not the wealthiest country in the world, but it's 100 million people.
Oh my God!
So if you just do the math there,
yeah.
there's plenty of players, plenty of things to happen. So I think the Philippines is the most interesting story, just because they are kind of the most Western in the region. I mean, in general in Asia, gambling is deeply in the culture, and people love to gamble. But in terms of governance and I suppose the people that run the countries, they will never accept or endorse it, right? So it's kind of a known, but at the same time, let's not promote it type of thing, right? The Philippines is the first grand experiment just because they are a little more Western and U.S. Allied and a little more progressive in those things. So it'll be very interesting to see the transition and how the region kind of looks at what happens, because the Pogo license was getting a little crazy. They did a fantastic job of winding that down, bringing in a local license. So I think that'll be kind of what the market, the whole region looks at over the years. Thailand's very interesting. They're looking at, I think, a combination of land-based and online. The news changes every 3 months. So quite recently, it seemed like this was going to happen as soon as this year or next, and then it's been kind of walked back. They seem to have some pretty good ideas around controls and like how to profile the locals and who's allowed in and whatnot. I believe in some of the land-based restrictions may almost be like Singapore, where they either bar locals or you have to have like $1 million net worth to get in or something. Mm-hmm. So it's much more of a tourism and entertainment play. As far as the online goes, I've heard so much, I don't know, but they have acknowledged that they're looking at it. So that would be my guess for kind of next in the region. There's too many locations, but to take it kind of maybe a bit farther away and something much bigger is India. India is gigantic. I mean, again, when you've got over 1 billion people, that's a huge market. Yeah. Similar to the US or Canada, it's all done state by state. And I'm no expert on India, but my understanding is games of skill are okay in most states. Games of chance are not. So poker and fantasy and whatever is actually regulated and allowed in a lot of places, whereas straight casino, sports betting and everything is not. There has been talk federally about some sort of overarching law about what games of skill they'll allow, but that's always kind of in flux. So those are kind of the regions that I think are taking steps toward regulating and capturing the tax revenue. Not a lot of others that I know about currently.
Would you foresee, like in the next 5 to 10 years, that more countries in the region will open up eventually for regulation, or is it more, on the other hand, that countries like China, for example, are just becoming better at enforcement and so on? Where is this heading?
My hunch is, for the most part, culturally, it'll take a long time to change. But there's Japan has been looking at integrated resorts for a long time. Like, if usually land-based comes first and then they look at online, right? So there's signs of different markets looking at it, but I think it's just in the culture, again, it's so well known. Yeah. It's so well, a lot of holidays, people gamble, or, there's like Japan has workarounds with, what's it called? The pachinko parlors.
Pachinko, yeah.
Right? So it's there, and yet, like, on the record, it's not. So I wouldn't guess a whole lot of changes, but as these countries grow and they're looking for new ways to seize tax revenue and bring talented IT workers in, I mean, we'll see if Thailand, Philippines, India, etc., if those regulated markets, if others start looking and saying, this is a good way to grow the tax base, we'd rather capture it and have responsible gaming and everything than things that are offshore. So I'm hopeful, but I wouldn't bet too heavily on the next 5 years, maybe the next 10.
All right, interesting. And if we think about the industry from a player perspective, the live casino niche is very popular in some regions in Asia, right? And can you talk about perhaps how the player is different from the European player, and what are they looking at, and how to be successful then, let's say, from an operator point of view?
So this goes back to what we were saying earlier, just there's less trust. And the fascinating thing to me is some things that I'm seeing people comment on in the European and American markets now, which are considered these new exciting things, I saw in 2010. So many people may not know this, but something like Live Dealer, it came from a lack of trust. RNG was not trusted. When I moved to the region, there was basically no slots market. It was Live Dealer or sports betting. Live Dealer often had CNN on in the background, so you could see that it was actually live. To this day, a lot of providers will have a number that you can text, and your number will come up with like 3 or 4 digits masked, just to see that it's live, right? So it was all born out of a lack of trust. Now, that lack of trust eventually turned into the kind of evolution like luxury product, right? It's the coolest, best looking, sexiest casino product now. But in Asia, it was always born from that lack of trust. And eventually more RNG and slots happened, like it is coming along as a market. But I would say that was one area where it was ahead. Another is payments. Like, payments always needed to be instant. If you couldn't do a withdrawal in hours or at least under a day, you would probably never see that player again. So again, this is something I see commented on recently about, well, how fast withdrawals are getting in the regulated markets. And like, this has been table stakes in Asia for a very long time. And it's because of that lack of trust. You had a big win. I want my money out now.
Yeah.
Right? So the term we often use is leapfrogging, like, because there were certain things that were never built up, just the expectations are suddenly there for the new technology already. In East Asia, you'll see more, desktop penetration. It's important with VIPs and whatnot, 10, 20% of people using desktop. In Southeast Asian markets, it's basically zero. It can be as low as 1 or 2% for a lot of platforms and a lot of providers. So your mobile phone is the computer that you own, and that's all that really matters. So if you're not mobile first, if everything's not optimized for these type of devices, you're going to have trouble.
Yeah, I would imagine that in the region, in many cases, technology has leapfrogged the Europeans or the North Americans, perhaps, and let's say how efficiently users navigate other apps. Let's say the expectation would be that when you gamble online, you want that seamlessness. Let's say that you are perhaps more used to as than a European, for example.
Absolutely. But I think where the mistakes get made is the Silicon Valley companies of the world test on every device, and they really look at how does this work on this, that, or the other. If you're going to be in Indonesia or Philippines, the average phone may be $100 or $150. And, TikTok and everything work on those phones fantastically. But if you take some sort of, heavy WebGL, fancy 60 megabyte game and try to put it on one of these devices, it doesn't matter if their internet connection is solid or your servers are right down the road. This device has 10% of the computational power of the latest iPhone. Right. So knowing the demographics and what devices are being used and what the internet speeds are, I think the Philippines has 7,000 islands and Indonesia has 14,000. So, there aren't fiber optic cables in each and every place, right? So knowing just what infrastructure you're dealing with, that's where I see a lot of things kind of fall short. The expectations are high because they've got TikTok and they've got, Facebook is a very optimized platform for these markets, right? But you got to go in knowing that, okay, this is what they're using. This is the expectation.
Right. So do your homework on the demographics you're dealing with and the internet penetration and what devices people actually use over there, because they might be different, as you point out, than your everyday customer in Europe. I want to shift discussion point for a bit. So to zoom in more on the work that you do with TESTA. So you're a crowdsource testing company, and I'm curious to know a little bit more about the research that you've conducted in South Asia specifically, and some of the most important findings, perhaps that you.
Yeah. So we were just kind of alluding to it. In those markets, we see that generally a game, a website is going to load 30-40% slower than in more developed countries, right? We see that the devices are going to be have a lot less computational power. Internet speeds will be lower. The other thing that's a little more technical that is outside of speed is latency. So that's how long it actually takes from little bits of data to get from point to point. So all of these things paint a picture of, when we test, say, a game in many locations around Asia, or we test Europe versus Asia, generally it's going to be slower, it's going to be more difficult in those regions. So this is where really dialing things in and having good techniques for how do you load a game or bring things ahead of time, or what games make sense for this market are very important. A lot of it is downstream of demographics. Southeast Asia, a lot of these countries are in their, I think the biggest cohorts are 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, right? We live in countries where, the demographics are aging. They're a bit older. So they're much more online. Payment methods are a heck of a lot different. Part of why these regions are growing so much is, especially in the pandemic, they've turned from kind of very cash-based societies to now there's a lot of e-money, and kind of like in the Philippines, for example, there's something called GCash, which is actually one of the major telcos found a way to basically do an e-wallet on the phone, and the other major telco did the same. So suddenly it's gone from a totally cash-based society to you can pay with your phone for everything, and this happened in a matter of years. So when those payment methods suddenly open up, then any sort of financial or gambling industry can do a lot better, because beforehand everything was cash based. I think in the Philippines now credit card penetration is as high as 15%, but previously it was like 3-4. So again, I would call it, and I learned this in a real estate startup, there's kind of a layer cake of technologies, and everybody thinks, they're the last layer and they built everything, when really, you've got financial infrastructure and logistics and all these things that, you need all these things to deliver your service on top, right? So understanding how all those things are kind of built is very important.
Yeah, brilliant. And how is the competitive landscape, let's say, over there? Are the operators generally up to speed? Are they doing extremely well? Is it really tough to establish yourself there as a new operator/suppliers, or are they kind of lacking some technologies, let's say?
I see a lot of boom and bust. I see a lot of platforms that think as long as they can find the right affiliates or whatever, they can do well over there. I would say generally people are quite behind, and I'm shocked by how many times when we look under the hood, which is something we do at TESTA and we have in our consulting business as well, the servers are on the other side of the globe. And like I said, if it takes 200 or 300 milliseconds to get the result of a slot spin or a card or whatever from a server far away, that's going to compound in a slower, worse experience in the region. So generally, I don't see enough of an investment. We were having this discussion with the commercial parts. I think people think, well, as long as we're there and making the deals, it'll flow through. But if you're going to take the region seriously, you have to host locally. You have to get the right CDNs. You have to optimize your software for the region, and that's what we built an initial business around, and what TESTA was kind of spun off from. It was making sure that people understood and could compare. This is what it was before, and this is what it is now.
Yeah, brilliant. And Kyle, I must ask you as well. As a hopeless European here living in Malta and growing up in Sweden for my life, it seems like Europe and North America somewhat is waking up to the fact at the moment that many territories in Asia are just outpacing the rest of the world economically. What's your view? From a helicopter, from a macro perspective here, will Asia end up dominating the world in the next 5 or 10 years, would you say? And how do you see this development in general in Asia?
Probably not dominating, but I think this kind of multipolar world is certainly coming. There's a lot of things happening in the region that are really changing kind of the makeup of world markets, I guess is the term. A lot of manufacturing is moving to Southeast Asia, so a lot more investment in infrastructure, a lot more high-paying jobs. Now that everybody has a mobile phone, and being part of the kind of online community is so much cheaper and so much more affordable. You've got all these people that are online, and they're finding gig work. They're out there, doing creative jobs or software jobs, or there's a whole generation that's come up, similar to what we're seeing here, doing gig work or doing work from home because they can make more money doing this type of work online, and the company's paying them if they're overseas. They feel they're saving money, so it's a match made in heaven, right? A lot of development out of Vietnam, et cetera, software development, that is.
So just a final question. Talk more about your vision with TESTA as a company. Where do you see the company in a couple of years' time, and what have you accomplished so far?
Asia was our backyard, but so far we've really been a global company from day one, and that's what's so fun. We do regulated markets in the US. We do.
No worries. All right, so final question for you here today, Kyle. Talk about your vision with TESTA. Where do you see the company in a couple of years' time, and what have you accomplished so far?
So far, it's been really fun because we've been a global company from day one. The Asia markets are kind of home turf, and that's our backyard. But we've been doing crowd testing all over the globe for the last 2 years. So US and Latin America and Africa. So it's been very cool to kind of get a pulse on all the different markets happening around the region. My vision for the next few years is right now we're a fairly new business. We have a growing list of customers. People do know we're out there. I want to be this kind of very important partner that you use if you're going into a new market that's either, I like to say, physically far or culturally far away from what you know. We can help you get insights from the ground. You can see if things are performing or not. You can learn a bit more about the market. even things as basic as just having a local tell you if the translations make sense can be hugely valuable. So I want to see in the next couple of years that we're helping gaming businesses with all of these things. Furthermore, I mean, our superpower is that we just have 1,000 testers, 90 countries all over the globe. We want to be able to do more in the future. Our kind of background is technical, QA, performance, kind of very functional testing, but we want to get more into helping business people make business decisions. So a little more insights from the ground and research, so people can make the right decisions about what to invest in, what to acquire, what to get rid of, whatever. So those are the goals. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, Kyle, like we've been really proud to have a partnership with TESTA now for the last year and a half, something like this, where Next and TESTA, we work together to bring some of these really strong insights into the market that you produce. And so I just want to thank you for sitting down with me at the G2E a couple of years ago, sharing your vision with me, because it was something really interesting, and it's just great to see the company growing constantly. I see you guys are exhibiting left, right, and center now, and it just keeps growing and growing. So really happy to be a partner together on this journey, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Likewise, thanks so much for being a partner as well. It's been really fun.
Awesome.